Buenos días. Good morning. Báyò, everyone. Buenos días a todas. Welcome.
Buenos días.
Hola. I'm going to make a quick introduction in Spanish and then we will go to English. Voy a hacer una pequeña introducción en español y luego voy a pasar al inglés. Si necesitan traducción, abajo hay un sistema de subtítulos que dice subtítulos, creo que es una CC abajo, y ahí pueden definir su idioma de subtítulos en caso de que los necesiten. Bienvenidas a todas, bienvenidos a todos. Welcome, Báyò. We are so happy to have you here. Estamos encantadas de tener aquí a Báyò. Quería empezar por contarles que este es el último panel de nuestra serie de conversaciones del programa Cuerpo Enjambre. Para quienes no están en Cuerpo Enjambre es un programa de creación interespecie. Muchas de las personas que están en Cuerpo Enjambre están aquí y también hoy decidimos abrir esta posibilidad al público para que podamos compartir este momento con Báyò, que nos va a hablar de la cura poética del alma. Yo no me voy a tomar mucho tiempo, solamente quiero decirles qué tan privilegiadas y privilegiados somos de tener aquí a Báyò, y que Cuerpo Enjambre pues es un espacio que ha sido supremamente enriquecedor y que va a seguirlo siendo. El proceso de creación va a seguir de aquí a julio, entonces quienes estén hoy aquí estén atentas, atentos, porque posiblemente hacia la segunda mitad del año vamos a tener todos los resultados de Cuerpo Enjambre a los que vamos a poder compartir. Báyò Akómolafe es un filósofo, es un académico trans público nigeriano. Ya todos han podido leer un poco sobre su biografía. Entonces, sin más preámbulo, le voy a dar la palabra y voy a pasar a hablar en inglés. De nuevo, para quienes necesiten subtítulos, está abajo la función. Y si tienen alguna pregunta, nos pueden preguntar por el chat, que estaremos atentas a ayudarles. So, Báyò, welcome. Welcome. I'm now swapping to English. The function of subtitles is on. Thank you for being here. The Curapoiesis of the soul. Before we get into business, I would like to ask you, for how long do we have you? This call is normally scheduled for 2 hours. We normally have to listen to you, and then we have time for conversation and interaction, a dialogue. That's the richest part of it, obviously after listening to you. So let us know how long we have you so that we can time ourselves a bit. Normally we take a break, but we could skip the break as well. So let us know about your
I was told that I only had to show up for 5 minutes. Is that okay? You caught the joke. I thought you were going to be dismayed or something. I don't know. I'm here to. I'm just playing with the moment, and it might be 30 minutes that I speak, and I could go in conversation for the other 90 minutes. I'm just here to play. I'm a bit hungry though, but I'm here with my siblings to think. Yes.
Excellent. We are in your able hands, Báyò. Over to you.
And we're all in the hands of the gods, of the moments, of the spirits of our time. I greet you all, my siblings. And I thank you for this another invitation to speak and to be with you and to think alongside with you. Is it possible that we all greet each other? Just maybe unmute ourselves and say hi. That usually feeds me. Might hold me up for a moment.
Hello, so beautiful.
Hola, Báyò.
Hola.
Hola, Báyò.
Hola a
Hey,
todos.
Hello.
Oh my dog.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. Thank you. I feel full, nourished. Thank you. Hi. Tatiana, what's that snake in front of you? There's a thing. Anna, you're
Um,
muted.
it's wire.
Wire. You're
Wire.
making stuff with wires?
I'm making trees.
You're
Yeah.
making trees with wires. Thank you.
Yeah.
For making trees with wires. It's important work, I believe.
Thank you.
It really is. Deleuze might have called that deterritorialization. But I, again, just want to say greetings to you all. And I'm speaking here from Chennai, my home in India, my family. I did say that I was feeling hungry. The fuller story is that I'm slightly exhausted, slightly misaligned with the time that I'm in because I've been traveling nonstop. Someone told me comically yesterday or 2 days ago that my jet lag has jet lag, which is nice, I guess, because yeah, if my jet lag has jet lag, then somewhere along the line they would meet in the middle. Yeah, and I'm soon to travel again in a couple of days. It's been nonstop travel. I feel exhausted, but I feel excited and nourished just being here to speak about what I call the Curapoiesis of the soul. You probably have not heard of the word Curapoiesis before. Don't look in the dictionaries. I made it all up last year, I think. Yeah, it was sometime last year that I made the word up. The word Curapoiesis actually means care in its becoming. So cura stands for care, and poiesis means becoming, right? And the reason I want to start here by just speaking about Curapoiesis a little bit. I'm not fond of definitions, but by Curapoiesis, I'm trying to disturb the account of care as a good thing. Now, that may not sit well with you, and it's fine, okay? All the feelings you feel now are very fine and welcome. The idea is that when we speak about care, the most popular ways we speak about care imagines care to be a nourishing, good thing, right? We never speak about care in negative light. No one does that. No one means harm when they say, I care for you, right? Care is by definition, good thing. Except the etymology of care doesn't exactly tend in that direction. Care seems to be duplicitous if you examine the roots of the word. Care can mean something good like nourishment or feeling good. And it can also mean grief, right? If you actually check out the etymology of the word care, it's connected to grieving, right? And of course, there are many things to be said about grieving, but the idea here is that care is not intrinsically beneficial. To stretch that out even further, I will make some claims in the course of my brief presentation. I really want to get to the part where we have a conversation. Think about my presentation as side notes, provocations meant to inspire thinking. They're not meant to land in the quality of being right or wrong. They're invitations to dance, if you will. I'm a father for some of you who know me, I tell the story all the time, of an autistic boy. His name is Kea. He's 7 years old. He's my prophet. He's my teacher. He teaches me things that I wouldn't learn about the world and myself otherwise. He's incredibly dear to me, as you might imagine. I love him deeply, my son. But our relationship hasn't been smooth sailing. There were times when it was really difficult for me to show up as a father to him. And by that, I mean that even though I'm a trained clinical psychologist and I have some understanding of what autism is, it's one thing to understand this theoretically, and it's quite another to be in relationship with the phenomenon. Now, I've learned also that I'm on the spectrum, but my son is even more so than I am. When he was born, around 2 years old, when we started to notice that he was behaving with the world differently, my fear started to ramp up. I started to get really worried about him, about his life. He was just 2 years old. But I started to get really worried about the future, about the world that we were bringing him into, right? I didn't come from a people who generally accepted autism as a condition. In fact, the world I come from in Nigeria would probably see it as something to be healed, some kind of demonic infestation that could be vanquished with lots of prayer. I grew up in a Christian world. And so even though I understood at an intellectual level what was happening and what was emerging, my emotional state was deteriorating and I was getting deeply worried. And then my demon started to act up. Sometimes I would tell my son, I would ask my son to look in my eyes, very gently, just could you look in my eyes when he was 4 or 5? And my son absolutely refused to perform visuality in that way. It seemed like he preferred to see from the sides of his eyes than to see in a frontal way. Every time I attempted, and this is not a conscious attempting, I don't know how many of you are parents here, but it seems like there were other intergenerational forces that were acting upon or within my relationship with my son that almost stopped me from being there for him in the ways that he deserved. In fact, I will put it this way, that it seemed like I was embracing him, and then slowly along the way, my embrace became asphyxiation. I was suffocating him with my expectations, with the way that I was gently intruding on his spaces. And that's what I mean by care becoming troubling. That is, in the ways that our bodies are held, in the ways that we hold other bodies and our world, it can get pretty troubling quickly. We can get stuck in particular paradigms of care that no longer know how to hold our bodies or to generate new kinds of futures. I'm a Black scholar, so I traffic a lot in conversations around Blackness, the antebellum South in the United States, slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, what it means to be African, all of this. And so it might be shocking to you to hear me say that the plantation, the slave plantation, is a form of care. You might say, that doesn't sound right. It tortured bodies. It killed people. Yes. Care can be carceral. Care can be a form of incarceration. Care isn't the good thing that we, it's not necessarily or intrinsically good. I'm saying care is a kind of politics. Care is already eco-political, geosomatic, speculative. Care is political, right? Think about the forms of care that a nation state performs when it reinforces its immigration policies, right? It's a form of care, right? It's a value, right? We want people who are coming in to feel welcome. But inclusion can be a form of violence, right? The very act of including others can be a form of violence, right? We have mythological accounts and stories from Greeks to the Yoruba people in West Africa that speaks about care becoming a form of imprisonment, right? All the bodies that I know friends of mine that travel to the United States, grew up in the United States, that still speak about the ways that they had to change their names so that their names were pronounceable by people that they were growing up with, right? Care is not necessarily or intrinsically benevolent. It can become a form of trouble. So when I say that the plantation was a form of care, I want you to notice that there were modalities put in place to support bodies, to support modernity, the project of white modernity. One form of care that erupted from the plantation was a diagnostic criterion called drapetomania. Drapetomania is a medical tool, a psychotherapeutic tool, if you will, a clinical tool meant to say basically that if you're having feelings of trying to escape, it's addressed to the slaves in the plantation. If you're having feelings of wanting to escape the plantation, then there's something wrong with you. That is an embrace, if we might ever trace an embrace in a plantation, but that is asphyxiation. That is holding a body so tight that you snuff out the life out of it. And that is why I speak about curapoiesis, because I want to examine the ways that care becomes itself and care becomes other than itself. How care can be born from care. How care escapes the imprisonment of care. If that is seemingly confusing, you might think about the act of marronage and fugitivity. When Black bodies in the plantation needed to escape the plantation, that was care escaping care. That was care seeking the indeterminacy of a world that is larger than the forms that it has known for a while. So that's how I want to start. That's how I want to introduce this concept of curapoiesis. The care is not a noun, it's a verb. Care is a verb, it's a process. It doesn't have a resolution, right? Utopia can be a form of care, a socio-political form of care, or care writ large. And yet, utopia can harbor a form of violence, right? In fact, utopia is very often in the text, in literature, examined as a form of violence. So that's how we start. So what do I mean by the curapoiesis of the soul? How does the body come in here? How do we begin to analyze care with regards to the body? And what do I mean by the soul? This is what I want to speak about today in the time that we have. How many of you grew up understanding the soul as something inside our bodies? Maybe you had some Christian background, right? The story is that we have a soul, or some other theologies might say that we don't have souls, we are souls. We are souls within flesh, right? And so it's like a space suit or an earth suit. We are souls, we're ghostly things that are inside bodies. This is how I came to understand the soul growing up. In fact, my entire public intellectual career started from my desire to understand what the soul was. My first discipline that I chose going into the university was actually theology. I wanted to understand what the soul was. And then I opted quite dramatically for cognitive neuropsychology because I wasn't quite sure of the theology program. I felt maybe the best way that I could prove that the soul exists is to study the brain. But the program for cognitive neuropsychology wasn't quite developed in Nigeria then. So I opted for psychology. And that was my background. I want to speak about the soul today and why I think about it differently and why I think about it especially in relation to the body, right? Why the body is quite intimately attached to the soul, but not in the Cartesian way that I grew up to learn, right? That the soul connects with the body at the pineal gland, right? And that's where mind meets body. It's a dualism that we are used to. Isabel, you know about this dualism, of course, right? It's how we have learned to understand our bodies, how modernity teaches us to think about ourselves, right? How Christianity or how Christians sing, "This world is not my home, I'm just passing through," right? written within our songs, at least the songs that I grew up with, is the idea that we do not belong to this world. We do not belong to this planet. We do not belong to ecology. Where we belong is a shiny utopian city that is beyond materiality. I want to kind of bring the soul down to earth and also bring the body deeper into the earth in my analysis of the Curapoiesis of the soul. But you've invited a Yoruba person, and Yoruba people start with story all the time. So I want to start with a story, okay? This story I learned, and I have shared the story. It's my default story. Anytime I want to get into the depths and the heart of my work, I say this story. You probably have heard me say this 1,000 times, or you've never heard it at all. I hope most of you have not heard me speak about this story. It's the story of Eshu. Now, Eshu is the trickster in Yoruba Ifa tradition, right? I come from the Yoruba people, and we have a spirituality, a cosmology that is called Ifa, right? Within Ifa, there are stories and accounts and metaphysical histories of super beings called Orishas. I don't know how many of you, by a show of hands, are aware or familiar with the Orishas. You know about the Orishas, okay? Okay. Isabel, you didn't raise up your hand.
It's
You
new
don't
for
know
me.
about them? Oh,
I've heard
oh.
I've heard the Orisha's word, but I'm dying to hear the story.
Okay. The Orishas are like the Avengers of the Yoruba cosmology. They're the gods. You know, we have a system of gods and goddesses. Very, very powerful system. The reason why it's such a popular spiritual system, not quite a religion. I wouldn't say Ifa is a religion, but it's a nature, you might call it a nature-based religion, right? And it is popular because during the transatlantic slave trade, over 400 years, this beautiful tradition became the dominant Afro-diasporic spirituality, adopted by Black bodies in the plantation from Brazil to Cuba. It gave birth to Santeria, to Capoeira, to Candomblé, to Umbanda. It intercepted and intermingled and diffracted itself into these traditions, right? So across the world, there is an appreciation of the Orishas. And the Orishas, there are many names, you know, they have many names, and there are many of them. There's the god of metal, Ogun. There's the god of thunder and fire, Shango. There's the god of the ocean, Yemoja, the goddess of the ocean, Yemoja. There's Obatala, who created you and I. You know, there are many of them. In fact, some poetry suggests that there are 400 Orishas and one. It's beautiful the way it says it. 400. It doesn't say 401. It says 400 full stop and one. The idea is we don't know the name of the and one. There is a sense that that Orisha is still emerging. So this is an emergent panentheistic spirituality. Okay, now to the story. That's the background, the scaffolding. How did we account for the transatlantic slave trade? We told many stories about it, not just across the pond, but on the African continent, in West Africa, in Nigeria. And one of those stories, not quite sublimated to popular culture, but known to those who, like me, are nerds, is the story of Eshu and how he responded to the crack of the transatlantic slave trade. So when the ships came, the gods came together, the Orishas came together and said to themselves, how do we chase away these ships? How do we support our people? How do we save them from this horrible, violent act of theft and murder and whatever, and war and famine and death? How do we save them? And so the god of war, whose name is Ogun, who's who is also the god of victory. So you know that he would have won, right? He decided to mount up an insurgency, a campaign against the white slavers. And so they came to the beach to fight. These are the stories we tell. They came to the beaches to fight, to the Bight of Benin, to Badagry in Lagos. They came and they fought. But Eshu, who is the trickster, who is often known as the man of the crossroads, he sits at the interception. We say things like, Eshu, come close, but not too close, right? You don't want to bring Eshu into your house. Eshu sits at the edge. You don't want to bring him too close. If you bring him too close, you're in trouble, right? It's like sleeping with a wolf in the wilds. You might like the experience, but you wake up with fleas, right? So that's the idea of Eshu. Eshu intercepted the war and went to his brother, the god of war, and said, I have a better strategy. How about we, instead of fighting these people, how about we, negotiate with them? And if you reject that strategy, how about we fight them in the morning when there's light instead of at night? We may not have the vision to execute this war properly. He threw lots of arguments to stop his brother from fighting this war, from executing this insurgency, this campaign to chase away slavery. You might wonder why he did that. And Brother Ogun was not exactly open to any of his younger brother's ideas. But then Eshu brought palm wine. Palm wine is a very intoxicating brew, alcoholic brew. I think I've seen it in Bahia in Brazil, and it is also available quite popularly in Nigeria. So he brought this palm wine and gave his brother just as a gesture of peace in a time of war. Ogun took the palm wine and he was knocked out. And all the other people, all the gods, all the orishas were knocked out. They went to sleep. And then Eshu snuck aboard. Is it sneaked or snuck? I don't care. He snuck aboard the slave ships. He entered into the slave ships and he traveled with the slaves across the Atlantic to creolize the world. When I first heard that story, I was angry because I was entering my activist stage and I wanted narratives of victory. I wanted indigenous stories of, we won, we chased them away. But this is not the story. This story is not about victory. This story, it's about following minor gestures. This story is about the body misbehaving. This story is about exploiting the cracks. Eshu did not try to win because he understood something that we as Yoruba people and as Africans are slowly beginning to understand, that sometimes victory could get in the way of transformation. That when we win, we risk too much. Eshu decided not to challenge the system by presenting an alternative of victory. He decided to follow the leaks, the slippages, the openings in the system, and to exploit them. And in doing so, we have samba in Brazil. We have Rastafarianism in Jamaica. We have all these other traditions because Eshu, the trickster, inseminated himself into those cartographies. So this is how this story interacts with my account of the soul and the body. Because we are entrained within modern civilization and the systems of accommodations that we grow up in and we make sense of the world in, we are habituated into thinking of the body as a whole, as a complete thing, as a normative thing, right? There are ways that bodies should appear in the world in order to be legible to that world. So the body is already a concrete reified assemblage of presences, right? The body is an artifact of presence, if you will. Right. I think that this is not a full account or an adequate, not full, an adequate account of the body. I think the body is not just an artifact of presence. I think the body is an artifact of absence. That is, we have learned to look at the body as the thing that appears. I think the body is that which does not appear. The body is not just the thing. The body is the wound, the opening in the thing. The body is a crack, is what I'm trying to say. The body is a crack. The body is not just my hand and my head and my eyes and my heart and my organelles and my skin. The body is the thing that does not appear, the opening gesture, the invisible ties that connect me with the White House, with state legislators, with policy reform, with corporate tactics, with the ocean. All the things that we don't usually pay attention to is also part of the body. Now, having said that, what do I mean by the soul then? I want us to think about the story that I've just told, Issue, traversing the Atlantic. And then on this other end, this invitation to think about the body as a crack, not just the thing that is cracked, but the crack itself, the opening. Okay. When we speak about the soul, we have, as I've said earlier on, we imagine the soul to be the ghost in the machine. But I want to offer two new definitions of souls and contrast that with ghosts. Okay. How many of you believe in ghosts or have seen a ghost? Oh, really? This is a different. Wow. I wish I could just change the conversation and speak about ghosts. Okay. I see hands up. Impressive. I haven't seen one. But I think that may not be too far off. I'm recently engaging in new kinds of experiences, and I think my world is changing a little bit. So I might be brought to that kind of experience soon. But I digress. In my redefinition, my provocation, ghosts are stabilized entities, traumatically entangled with the architecture of presence. I'll say that again. Ghosts are stabilized entities. So a ghost is not necessarily the thing that goes woo at night, or the thing that lives under your bed or surprises you from out of left field. A ghost is more than that. To me, a ghost is a pattern of repetition, right? It's a pattern of repetition, right? I don't know if you, like me, like horror movies. I like horror movies. You probably don't, but there is a particular theme and trope that runs through most Hollywood-produced ghost movies that I watch. It's that it's usually the case that a young family, vibrant and happy, moves into this new house. They buy up a house and they're excited. It's mostly a white family. I haven't seen a ghost movie with a black family, a black American family. It doesn't work. The idea.
I think the thriller video of Michael Jackson.
No. That's a different theme or trope. That's the werewolf. That's the lycanthrope, right? The lycanthrope. It's lycanthropic, wolf man. The ghost is a different thing. And I don't think it, just like the zombie was taken by Hollywood and made into a thing. It was taken from Haitians, from Africans, from slaves. You know, that idea. There's something about ghosts and the ghost movie and the ghost trope that doesn't quite work as an aesthetic with a black family. Maybe because if a black family moves into a new house and they hear a sound, they're out the next day or the same day. And that's the end of the movie. But Hollywood likes to centralize white families because it pushes the plot forward. Because then they get to say things like, let's split up and see what's happening. Black families don't split up to see what's happening. They get out of there, right? I'm playing with tropes, right? Stereotypes here. But in these movies, a family moves into a new house, and then they find out quite quickly that the walls are making sounds, that the new furniture that they've just put in a new place is floating or doing strange, weird, misbehaving things, right? This takes me back to the words of Zora Neale Thurston, who said, ghosts hate new things. Ghosts hate new things, right? A ghost is almost like a lingering presence, a lurking presence of trauma. When something is incarcerated in a pattern of repetition and it does not know how to exploit cracks or to free itself, that's a ghost. And a ghost is not necessarily human. A ghost can be post-human, like an ant death spiral, where ants secrete this pheromonic chemical. And this chemical helps them guide their path through whatever they're navigating in the environment. But sometimes this pheromonic secretion can lead to an endless loop, and they go around in a circle. So if you go on YouTube right now and you type in ant death spiral, you might see ants. They just go around in a circle, just continuously, and they die in the circle out of exhaustion. That's a ghost to me. A ghost is a pattern of repetition. So you might then ask, what are other ways we can notice the ghost? Modern civilization is a ghost. Climate justice is a ghost. Our activisms are ghosts. And many times it might be the case that our bodies, even while alive, are already ghostly because we're stuck in patterns of doing things over and over again and thinking that something new might erupt from them. But what did Zora tell us? Ghosts hate new things. The necessary question then is, how do new things emerge in ghostly situations? The soul. So the soul to me is not a disembodied state of mind. The soul to me is an eruptive ecological force that disturbs the continuity of the ghost. Okay? Does that make some sense? This is provocative. The soul is not a disembodied spirit. The soul is an eruption, an explosion of power from the mechanism, the self-eruptive and self-effacing and self-migratory mechanism of the ghost in its repetitive patterns that leads to an explosion, right? And that is my siblings. That is how bodies become different. That is the curapoiesis of the soul. The soul here is an invitation for us to trace the body differently, to meet the body in its vastness as not a thing that is settled. Because if you leave with anything from my provocation today, I want it to be this sentence, that the body is not settled. It has never been settled. Right from Spinoza, the question has been haunting us as a civilization. What can the body do? Bodies are not settled. Modern civilization likes to teach us that bodies are settled or categorical. You have an identity, you have organs, you have a place, but bodies are more than location, spatiotemporal location. Bodies are not just located, they're also diasporic. Just like, for instance, if we get into the biology of it, Claudia is seated on that chair in front of me in my screen, but Claudia is also spread across her room, right? All the cells, millions of cells that Claudia, skin cells, hair cells, everything that she's been shedding, hundreds of millions of cells are located across the room. Claudia is not just the organism that we arrive at. Claudia is the cartography. Claudia is not the destination alone. Claudia is the journey. Of course, by Claudia, I mean all of us, that bodies are never stable, right? So this dynamic of the soul interrupting the ghost is how we notice the vocation of the body. Now, let's get back to the theme that I'm describing. And I wish I had more time, but I really want to get into the conversation. This takes a week or so to examine Foucault and his biopolitics, or what Achille Mbembe calls a necropolitics. These are ways of describing the body, right? It's not just systems and all of that. And because we tend to dissociate our bodies from the systems that we're trying to examine. Like, this is capitalism out there and this is my body. No, your body is a secretion of capitalism, right? Bodies are speculative becomings. Bodies are never still. Bodies are not stable. They are meta-stable, but they're not stable, right? They appear to be stable, but they're not so, right? So the ghost is the apparent stability of the body. The soul is the thing that reminds us that we're not as well put together as we think. If this feels too philosophical or abstract, let's bring it home to history. In 2020, we experienced the dynamism of the ghost and the soul in the pandemic. We've been crying for decades for a way to respond to climate chaos. We've been traveling to COPs and all the climate conferences. We've been doing so many things. Modern civilization tends to coddle you in entertainment pods, tells you to Netflix and chill. You know, it seems like modernity is the vocation of keep calm and keep watching. Just stay put. That's what it teaches us to do. Just be quiet. You know, anything you need can be dialed with your button. And then all of a sudden, it seems from out of nowhere, this infinitesimally small critter, which we have now nicknamed the coronavirus, steals like a shoe aboard a slave ship. It steals into our global economy, right? And it comes with trouble. It comes with death, and it upsets all our paradigms. Airplanes stop working. Oil companies start to give away their products for free. Capitalism starts to misbehave. Everything starts to glitch. The programs aren't working anymore. Children aren't going to schools. Even schools that are open aren't having any kids anymore. Parents start to wonder, what is education? Office spaces start to misbehave, right? Productivity doesn't make any sense anymore, right? It's like that tiny thing was the soul. That tiny thing was not a transcendent thing. It didn't come from outer space. It came from the intergenerational, interactive accommodations of the ghost in its activities, in its negotiations. And it erupted from there. We had encroached upon ecologies. We pushed and pushed and pushed, and then the world pushed back. In the words of Karen Barad, right? The world struck back. And so this thing stole into our lives and upset almost everything. That is how the soul interacts. And then we started to notice our bodies differently. We started to notice time differently. Some of us started to realize that if I get a clean bill of health, that doesn't mean that I'm healthy, because health doesn't work in isolation anymore. And so we started to say, let's give 6 feet to each other. We started to understand that our bodies are entangled in ways that modernity does not appreciate. And so when the soul shows up, bodies are mangled. Bodies start to misbehave because the soul, my siblings, and this is my stable definition. I don't like stable definitions, but this is one that I really cherish. I'm writing a new book about the soul right now, so I'm giving you a spoiler. The soul is the mispronunciation of the body. The soul is the mispronunciation of the body. It's the body in exquisite misalignment with itself. It's when bodies go out of whack. And by bodies, I really would like you not to think about the body as this. This is not the body, right? It is a body in a sense, but our bodies are socio-political, geosomatic, speculative, and eco-political. Our bodies are not just the things that are here. Our bodies are spread out. Our body is already a biopolitical field. Every time the government creates, or Silicon Valley, or our tech overlords like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, anytime they invent a new tool of surveillance or a new software, come up with something, our bodies are being tattooed and marked by these technologies. We are constantly being marked by a biopolitical field. Every time you're coming through a border of a new nation state, you are being marked, if not by the X-ray machine that deposits little morsels of radioactive elements in your body, maybe insignificant amounts, but some amount of radioactive material in your body anyway. You're being marked. Your body has never been your own. We've never been the owners of our bodies. Our bodies are fields of tension. I watched this ad. No, it wasn't an ad. It was actually a paper that I read, a news report in which a turtle was brought out from the ocean, was caught in the ocean, and it had Pepsi's logo imprinted on its shell. Just think about that for a moment. Pepsi is so pervasive. Pepsi is so widespread that even tortoises and aquatic creatures are billboards advertising for free these corporate ventures. Think about what Brazilian scientists recently discovered about microplastics, that microplastics are not just in the world or in water. They're in our bodies. They're in our reproductive organs. They're in our brains, right? So it's already too late to start to want to get plastic away from the environment, because we are plastic. We are plastic. So this is our body. Our body is a biopolitical, necropolitical. That is, our bodies permit vocations of living and dying. We may not grant consent for other lives to be taken, but we are participating in it, right? Consent is such a very shriveled concept. It doesn't really touch the ways we are already participating in the world, the ways we're already saying yes to Pepsi and Coke. We might be actively against these corporations while still participating in their continuity, right? So our bodies are biopolitical fields, necropolitical fields, geosomatic, earth, somatic, body. We are spread out. We are intergenerational. This is what psychologists have been discovering about trauma, that we cannot locate it to the event that caused the trauma alone. To do so would be to discount the experiences of, say, African Americans, who say that they live in traumatized and traumatizing experiences, right? Of course, Republicans would have you know that there's no such thing, that get over it. It was 400 years ago, or rather it was a couple of hundred years ago. There's no such thing as slavery trauma or something like that. But no, bodies give birth to other bodies that yield other bodies, that secrete other bodies, and their conditions. Everybody in this class right now, everybody in this that is hearing me right now, and your grandmother, has a little bit of 1945 vibrating in their bodies. 1945, August 6th, Hiroshima, the bomb blast in Japan, right? Deployed from the Truman presidency, right? What scientists discovered, I think in the 90s or the 70s, I can't remember when. I would need to cross-check. Sorry, my brain is still jet-lagged, so I might get some of these details wrong. But I know that examinations of our bodies and babies born up to the time of the 90s showed that every baby born had little trace elements of the radioactive explosion from 1945. That is still in our bodies. And I think everyone here is older than the 90, is older than being born in the 90s. You're older than that. So we are still participating in things that we did not give our consent to. We are participating in that war. The war didn't end in 1945. It is still singing in our blood right now. That is what I mean by the body being stuck. I'm trying to speak and not to give a justification for issues, transgressions, I'm trying to invite us to notice that the ways we think about bodies perpetuate systems of repetition. The body is not just that which appears, it is that which fails to appear. Eshu was exploring the soul, the curapoiesis of the soul. It was exploring the body in its discontinuity. Instead of trying to close the crack with healing and restoration and justice, he went into the crack to create something that didn't exist. Or in the words of Gilles Deleuze and what's my brother's name? I'm jet lagged. When these philosophers that I speak about all the time, I cannot remember the name. Felix Guattari. Thank you. Which I teach all the time. Felix Guattari says, bring something incomprehensible into the world. And that's what it should try to do by exploring the opening in the body. Right? So maybe I'll just end the conversation, my presentation in this way, that every time the soul erupts with its mispronunciation, with its exquisite misalignment, it opens out a field that is an invitation to what I call soul tending, right? An invitation to experimentation. It's an invitation to trace the body differently, right? It can also be an invitation to repeat the ghost, which is largely what we did, with our response to the pandemic. The pandemic came, exploded stuff, and then we started to proliferate phrases like back to normal, right? Let's get back to the ways things were. Let's get back to the shopping mall, right? Because modernity is the rehabilitation of the monster. We don't know how to tolerate the monster. The soul is always monstrous, right? When the soul erupts, it doesn't come fine and charming. The soul is a monstrous disruption of continuity. But modernity does its very best to smoothen out the raggedy, sharp, ugly aspects of the monster, so that it can fit back into the terrain and the economy and the legibility of the ghost. Right? So I speak about curapoiesis as the possibility of soul tending, right? And soul tending is the work of staying with weird fidelities. I wish I had time. It's the work of tending to the cracks. It's a different kind of politics. It's not resistance politics. It's not healing as restoration. It is often the refusal to be healed, right? It's often the rejection of care, as has been established by the familiar patterns of perception, right? It is a form of fugitivity. It is escape, if you will, from asphyxiation, right? And I want to end with this historical account of curapoiesis that is emblematized and exemplified in the work of a French visionary called Fernand Deligny. And Fernand Deligny was born in the time of the Second World War. He died on my birthday in 1996, September 18, 1996. Just in case you're thinking about sending birthday wish cake to someone, my birthday is September 18. So if you're feeling generous in my direction, I like coconut cake. Fernand Deligny was well, not famously autistic. I started with autism. I want to end with autism as well. Fernand Deligny was a visionary. He wasn't really trained as a clinical psychologist, but he worked with psychologists and he worked with Félix Guattari, for instance, Jean-Henri Tosquelles, these people who were part of the institutional psychotherapy or psychiatry movement, who noticed that psychiatry could be a form of fascism. But that's not my story today. My story is about what Fernand Deligny did with autistic children in the wake of the Second World War. What he did. Because in those days, children who presented with autistic symptoms, if you will, who were non-speaking or didn't speak with language in the ways that we do, didn't use language in the ways that we do, they were locked up in the asylum. Again, the asylum as a form of care can strangle other kinds of futures from emerging. And so they were locked up there and they were maltreated and they often died, according to some accounts, from poverty of conditions. They were not fed well. And Fernand Deligny had other ideas. He refused to think that those who speak, who use voice and language in the ways that neurotypical bodies do, were better off than those kids that couldn't use language in the ways that we do, those kids that were locked up. And so he went to the south of France, to a region, a very rustic, mountainous region called Cévennes. And he started this camp for the soul, right? He started this camp that was designed not to rehabilitate autistic children, but to follow them in the ways that Eshu followed them, right? Notice in the entire presentation, the theme of following, of radical accompaniment. Because to Fernand Deligny, neurotypicality is a ghost and autism is a soul, is an eruption that disrupts the ways that we frame the body. Fernand Deligny was very much like Eshu. He didn't want to heal autistic children. He didn't want to treat them. He just wanted to learn from them. He famously said, maybe language is getting in the way of us seeing the world differently. Maybe language is actually getting in the way. And so parents brought their kids to him, right? To him and his support staff. And those kids would walk around in the region. They would just walk around and do things. And Fernand Deligny encouraged his accomplices to follow them and make maps, okay? And these maps were not cartographical. They were ways of situating the body. They were almost like acts of tattooing the soul. And they just followed them. They didn't try to say, stay here, look into my eyes like I did with my own son. They didn't try to say, this is how to behave. They knew better and they followed his children. One of those kids was Jean-Marie, and Jean-Marie was this teenage boy that would walk around in circles. He would just keep on walking. And my son does that too, sometimes. He would just walk around in circles, just going around. And one day, the camp discovered that this autistic teenage boy was listening to water underground. I'll say that again, if that doesn't sound as miraculous as it really is. They couldn't hear water underground. None of us can, really, except it's loud enough to be heard. No one could hear it, but this boy could hear the sound of water rushing beneath the ground, which must have been an advantage to the camp. I haven't read further to examine whether it was an advantage, but the boy could perceive things that others could not perceive. They would not have known this about this boy or the world if they tried to rehabilitate him, if they tried to fix him up real good and include him in human sociality, right? But Delini did not do that. And that's just one of the many stories that came out from the 40s, from the 50s, from the 60s when he did this work. That suggests to me that our bodies want to do different things today. Our bodies are exhausted. I started this whole presentation by saying I'm exhausted. Our bodies are exhausted. We're tired. Our activisms are tired. Our medicine is tired. Our healing paradigms are tired. Our justice and resolution paradigms are tired, and reparative paradigms are tired. We need a break. We need a crack. And this crack may not look like justice. It may not look like an alternative. It may not look like healing. And yet, I think the soul is calling us into tentative experiments with what it means to be alive today. What that looks like is the tale for another session. But we are in the space of the soul. We're in the season of the soul. The world today and its globalized politics is erupting with a fever. If we heal this fever, we run the risk of returning to the ghost in its repetition. It's time to go through that crack. It's time for a curapoiesis of the soul. I think I'll end there. I thought I was going to do 30 minutes, but I did 1 hour. Yay. Okay, that's good. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Báyò. We could go on and on. I mean, thank you. Wow. I think I feel at least the need to digest a little bit, but I also know that we live in the chronos as well. So and honoring the tiredness and your jet lag, maybe we go directly to having a conversation. I'm sure
Let's do that.
Many of us are really keen. So let's open up for a conversation. There's many of us. There's 52 on the call. So in order to be, let's be aware that we are 52 and that many may want to speak and participate in the dialogue. There's a possibility of using the little hand to raise your hand and put yourself on the queue to speak. And Báyò, I think it will be really special if we could have a dialogue with you, so you not just going to a hearing position, but really interact. But what I'm going to propose is that we don't do the classic take 3 questions, back to
Right.
Báyò, but maybe you can insert yourself with your hand if you want to also come into the conversation. Does that sound like a good idea?
Good. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's do it. Whomever would like to go through the crack. Ser, over to you.
Hi, Báyò. First of all, thank you. I've been listening to you and reading your work for years now. So this is just a very special opportunity to be able to meet you. Yeah, you really helped me. I got a sense a few years ago that I needed to take a leap. When I heard you talk about like looking for magic, I was like, yes, I want to do that too. And I guess I wanted to ask you this information that this what you've communicated today about the soul, the body. I'm wondering how that has shifted your attention to the way that you just live, because like oftentimes when I start grasping all of these things, then like I just go through life and then I'm like, oh, this, like I don't know, my attention shifts. So I wanted to ask how your attention has shifted.
I'm almost paralyzed with examples of of what is emerging in my life now. I have an altar. If I could turn my screen, I would, but it's stabilized to this mic over here, so I can't do that. But I have an altar. You see, something happened to me last year that was, and politics is always personal, but the personal is always political, if that makes sense. That the personal is not isolated. The personal is already a vector of impersonal forces, if you will. So when I say that something happened to me personally last year, I want you to understand it as not just limited to me, because none of us have souls. We are part of souls, right? We are all enlisted into a soul. Modernity is a soul, right? It emerged from a crack and it congealed into a ghost, right? In its vibrancy, it performed its soulfulness, and now it's exhausted, right? Industrialization came with a crack, and now it's tired. So we're all enlisted and born into souls. And I could say for myself, sister, that I was born into a soul. I was reborn into a soul last year. It drove me to having, and don't tell anyone, my first ayahuasca experience. Now, I'd never had that before, but I had this February of this year. I'm not even sure how to even begin to tell the story of what I'm attending to right now, what I've started to hold space for, how my work has changed, how my relationship. I'm not trying to portray the idea of a dramatic shift, like a spectacular shift. I'm trying to say here that the things that and I like the way you framed it, sister, the things that I'm alive to now are no longer the same things that would have preoccupied my time. And I can't go into details. I'm so sorry, because they're so deeply intimate and alive for me right now that I feel putting language to it would spoil it a little, right? I wanted to live beyond the legible for a while, but I can assure you that the journals on my desk, I'm just going to turn my laptop a little bit, just so you see the journals I wake up to every morning and write in, about 9 of them. It seems I'm in a feverish place of the soul right now. And I'm not trying to define. The soul is not an act of definition. The soul is not a project. The soul is an invitation to touch. The soul is an invitation of radical accompaniment, to open oneself out to all the ways that we are relatives to ecologies beyond our knowledge, right? It's like the soul is the space of the strange. Yeah. I'm not sure. That felt meandering and felt evasive, but that's the best I can do, sister. I hope that suffices. I'm still living in it. Yeah. Yeah.
Luisa, go for it. And then Maria.
Thank you so much, Báyò. Thank you so much for the inspiring storytelling. And what got my heartbeat racing was this question, which has been with me for some time now. This year is my 61st year of being in this realm of life. And for the first time, I got exposed to the approach of family systems or systematic constellations. And I had known about it, and even my people, the Zulu people, were known to have contributed significantly to the stage. But being involved in a took the center of me in regard to this question of then who are we? If we are to have evidence of being connected to and knowing, without knowing that we know so much about what we are not expected to know, but we connect as humans when we open ourselves to it, and we know things about others, and we see that this idea of interbeing actually is alive. We are in each other, we are each other, we are everything, we are everything, we're all the elements. And it shows in evidence. But where I get troubled is I can't speak it. Where do I start speaking it and not feeling myself that perhaps I'm mad, not in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louisa. Thank you so much. I'm glad you cannot speak it though. I'm so glad that you cannot speak it. It'll be like trying to conquer the ocean with a tablespoon. You know, the idea, the fact that the world cannot be wrapped around with words, with language, with description is our greatest source of hope, right? It means that the world is bigger than us. And I like the idea of a world that's bigger than our human systems or attempts to define it. You know what would be greater than giving a positive answer to the question, who are we? It would be noticing that we are probably greater than identity. Not probably, we're greater than that which can be identified, right? Because the question of who we are is a question of identity. But the question of identity or identity is a placeholder. We're not stable enough to be identified. We are bigger. So ontology is the question of identity in a sense, right? It's a question of being. What is? It tries to grapple and wrestle with the question of what is, maybe a little bit for our purposes, what exists. But we are greater than being. And I don't want to say greater as if I'm some new age scholar. You know, I don't mean to say that we are superior to being. I mean that being is subservient to becoming, in a sense. Becoming is how everything is more than identity. And I think it's maddening. It is maddening, in a sense, to live within the kind of universe that we live in, where things are not stable, where things are not fully themselves, that we're always becoming something else. And that is what modernity is scandalized by, right? Let me say something else that feels important to say here. I think it is a tragedy that we're born human and we die human, right? It's a tragedy to complete the race of life. That might sound controversial, but completing the race has become, of late to me, a very impoverished goal, a very impoverished account of things, because it's set within the predetermined parameters of what a life should be, right? You start out with a gunshot, you know, and you start racing and you get to the end and you get a predetermined trophy. That feels impoverished to me, right? It's almost in the ways that we track life. Like you're born, you go to school, you do well in school, you get to the university, you hopefully do well, you get a job, you get married, you build a life, and you die. You know, it's the same track along the tarmac of human development. There's something that wants to disturb that and is disturbing that trace. So the soul is the place where we become different. The soul is the place where species mix with other species. For instance, I gave the account of the death spiral of the ants. One way that an ant might break free from a death spiral, which is very strong in its grip, one way it could break free is if it's infected by a fungus called Cordyceps or Pheocordyceps unilateralis. When an ant is infected by this fungus, it starts to grow a satellite dish of some kind from its head. And this satellite dish is a fungal station, right? Biologists call this ant the zombie ant. They're trying to say it is no longer an ant and it is not a fungus either. It's some kind of crazy, maddening mix between an ant and a fungus. I feel the soul is constantly trying to mix our bodies, constantly trying to mix things up. The soul is a trickster. And it will never settle our bodies because the body is not settled. So I've gone on too long. I just want to say, sister, that in these times of fascist uprisings, when it seems our bodies are being coached to stay still, the greatest gift to the ghost is the eruption of the soul. And the soul is not a call for stabilizing language or full descriptions. The soul is an invitation to settle with the idea that we are always unsettled and we will never find a final answer to what it means to be alive. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
To dance, Beth. Yes. We still have some time if anyone else would like to speak. Marcela, I'm gonna ask you, sir, if I can put you last because you already spoke. Yeah, is that all right? So Marce, Javi, and then Sir.
So first, thank you, Báyò, for
Yeah, thank you, Marcela.
sharing with us, and all of this is just very inspiring. I wanted to ask you about your experience with slowing down, and considering that you have like this very active, fertile life in which you are traveling all the time, but as you mentioned, you're exhausted and we are tired, and how, again, considering all what is happening in the world, we can balance this acting to invite others into this state of going into their inner selves and exploring themselves and finding joy also as an act of, I don't know if resistance or re-existence, but also slowing down for real.
Right, right. Yeah. I like how you added for real. Slowing down for real. There are 2 ways that people often speak to me about or try to get into conversation with me about slowing down. One is to achieve or to attempt to achieve some kind of balance, right? So I just intimated at you in the beginning with the information about my travel. I travel too much. I'm constantly traveling. So you asked me a question about me slowing down. From the perspective of this first way of responding to the question, it would be I'm not doing very well at slowing down. Even though I'm popular for saying the times are urgent, let us slow down. I'm not doing very well at slowing down. I'm traveling too much. I'm doing too many podcasts and interviews. I have a team around me working with me to help me say no. And they often say no, but even when they say no, I'm still in it. It's still quite a lot of work that I'm doing. Now, if that were the case, if that were the only way to think about slowing down as a way of achieving balance, then I would be in trouble. But I don't think of slowing down as achieving balance. In fact, quite to the contrary, I think of slowing down as experimentations within imbalance, right? Tentative practices within imbalance. And that's my way of saying, I don't know that I can ever achieve balance. I don't know what work-life balance means. I've been hearing about this amazing thing called work-life balance, right? That if I read this book, I would finally know how to balance my life with my kids. I don't know how to do it. Isabel obviously knows how to do it, but I don't know how to do it.
I have no idea. I
don't know
decided
how
to
to do it.
struck out the concept.
Yeah,
I hate it.
exactly.
I hate the concept.
You hate
There's
the
no such
concept.
there's no such a thing as a life outside of work and a work outside of life. What's that?
I don't
I mean,
know.
I don't
I
I
don't
don't I don't know.
I've
I
been
don't
looking for people who know this secret magic tool of
know.
work-life balance. But even when, see, it's not just a case of even if I could design my life in a way that maybe half of the time of my time I devote entirely to my kids, and half of my time I devote entirely to my work, right? So life and work are binarized in a neat and perfect utopian way. Even if I could achieve that, even if I could actually say that sometime in my life I came close to that, I found myself increasingly desiring work when I was playing with my kids, and increasingly desiring playtime with my kids when I was at work, so that they were already messing up with each other. I don't know that there is balance. So I think about life itself as the materialization of imbalance. That it's imbalance that gave birth to life and death, right? Life does not emerge from a mathematical precision, from things being equal with each other. It's the inequality that tips life over and makes life and living and dying possible, right? So I think of slowing down as a call to tend to imbalance, not to fix it, not to right it, not to make it work in some productive way, but to tend to it, to follow it, to listen to it, to what is emerging, right? And maybe one other way that I think about slowing down is, I've often told people, so this German brother wrote to me once, many years ago, when I said the times are urgent, let us slow down, at a keynote in Johannesburg. And he wrote to me and said, I've tried it, but it's not working. He also thought that I was inviting people into balance. And he said, I've tried it. I try to slow down. It's not working. I've adopted yoga and blah, 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 but it's not working. See, he was looking for something that I didn't offer him. And then I wrote back to him and said, slowing down is not a function of speed. Slowing down is a function of awareness. And by awareness, I don't mean some kind of subjective experience. I mean awareness in terms of noticing our bodies. Attention is a very material thing, right? Perception is material. Perception is political. I was inviting a soul tending. I was inviting touching the fields that make our bodies what our bodies are. I was inviting playing with weird fidelities. I was inviting experimenting with belonging, right? So it for me, sister, just to conclude my thoughts on this, it really isn't exclusively about adopting yoga or aligning ourselves with some inner truth or something like that, which is fine. I think it's fine. We need that. Slowing down for me is different. It's about getting off the track. It's about falling off balance altogether. And all of us are being tipped over at this point in time. Whether we recognize it or not, we are all in a state of imbalance. We're all traumatized. We're all beleaguered. We're all haunted. We're all disciplined and tattooed and moved and marked and enlisted by the forces at work in the world right now. We're grieving, even though we don't know how to cry. We are upset, even though we don't know how to express it. We're going through the motions, but I think the soul is inviting us to lose our way. The Yoruba people say, in order to find your way, you must lose it. And that's exactly how I think about slowing down. Losing one's way long enough to notice ourselves differently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a chance for one last, or maybe two if we are really quick. So Javi and then Ser, and then we will go back to Báyò for closing.
Thank you, Isa and Báyò. Thank you so much. Such a marvelous, beautiful tapestry, provocation you've shared. So I'd really like to invite you if you could weave a bit more with how time and the way we relate with and envision and kind of like embody time as also material and like lineal. So I would like the reversibility of it, right? So when we talk about life and being born and being dead, or I was thinking a lot about a forest that I witnessed when I was a child that was destroyed by a bulldozer to build a road, right? And how as a child I was shocked like by the apparent irreversibility in this lineal time, right? So again, it's an invitation. If you could, how do you understand how time then resonates with the soul? And if we need to somehow also lose our idea of time being lineal and having like a direction and an irreversibility to things that happen in time?
Yes, brother. Thank you. That's a beautiful, beautiful question.
Báyò, before you dive in, I'm sorry, I think I made a mistake. Because in India is a half hour, and here we are at the half hour now. You're at the top of the hour. So speaking about time, we have another half hour. I'm sorry, I was insane. I got tricked. So we do have time.
No problem.
Sorry about that.
Yes, India is for some reason, and whatever number of hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
People usually don't understand that. Why the 30 minutes? But anyway, okay. So, brother, I'm just gonna, from my notes, just read just a few lines of what I mean by, and I want to read it the way that I have thought about it and penned it. I have a theory of accommodations. What I mean by accommodations is a field of invisible threads that are the conditions of relationality. So let me just read it from the way that I wrote it here. Accommodations refer to the dynamic, contingent, and often invisible arrangements that sustain the conditions of relationality. They are the viscous, thick fields of entanglement that make bodies, experiences, and subjectivities possible, not as pre-existing entities, but as an emergent effect of ongoing negotiations. Okay? Accommodations are the ways in which the world holds bodies in particular forms, but also the ways in which those forms can slip, exceed, or disrupt their given shapes. To think with accommodations is to move beyond the liberal humanist fantasy of autonomous agency and instead attune to the subtle, often imperceptible shifts in texture, in gravity, in force. Okay, I'll stop there for now. And I read this out to suggest that time is not independent. Time doesn't exist by itself. Time subsists. Okay, so two things here. To say time exists, there's something about existing, X, that extricates the thing we're analyzing from its field of relations. I'm saying that time does not exist, it subsists. It's always in interaction with politics, with subjectivity, with architecture, with intensity, with other things, right? Time is a fabric and it's material, right? And the only way that I've come to understand time is within accommodation. So the question for me isn't what is time? It is how is time performed within specific kinds of accommodations, right? So when you speak about linear time, it's not that this is how time really is, of course, as I intuit that you sense. It's that time is practiced and accommodated within modernity as a linearity that flows like the arrow of God of Chinua Achebe's, genius, from the past to the present to the future. We perform time in this way as a spectrum of progress, if you will. The past is always being filled up. The present is always this infra-thin space, and the future is never really achievable. We're constantly grasping to arrive, right? And this time is chrononormative. That's my other way of thinking about the ways that we practice time and how this time stabilizes bodies, right? And it stabilizes identity. It tells you, oh, you're 20 years old, or you're 30 years old, you're a millennial, or you're Gen Z. It's a way of stabilizing bodies, right? But the question then is, how is time more than neurotypical? How is time autistic? Could it be that time is autistic? That time misbehaves. It doesn't quite sit still. It doesn't quite follow along the tracks that it has been placed upon. Is it possible that time slips and spills and leaks, right? And I think there are many examples of the ways that time misbehaves. And I gave one today, that you would think, brother, that 1945 ended in 1945. You would think that 1945 ended at the stroke of midnight, December 31st, 1945. That when 1946 came, 1945 ended. But 1945 is still echoing in our bodies today. You would think, especially in the field of psychology and psychotherapy and psychiatry, you would think that a past event is done with. But trauma is the way that we time travel. Trauma is a form of time travel. We didn't build the machine of time travel, right? We didn't design it. But trauma itself is an examination of decay as a form of creativity, as a form of temporality, that we are still stuck in multiple temporalities that are still happening, right? Those are the ways that time misbehaves, that time is autistic, that time does not fit along neurotypical pathways. The Yoruba people have a sense of time as slushy, right? As slushy, not even circular, because circular time could still be a form of linearity. Slushy time is when the past leaks into the future, and the future leaks into the past, and the present leaks nowhere. It's like the time is really misbehaving. And I wish we had time to, and maybe we do, and maybe we don't. But the idea is there's something happening beyond the neurotypicality of time in its linear march towards progress. One other way, maybe just one more, because I love these examples, was the intrinsic promise of modern progress, especially after the Second World War, that if we could rush to industrialization, by and by, we would live lives of pure luxury. We would have robots and artificial intelligences doing everything for us. In fact, we wouldn't have to work. In the 1900s, I think it's 1900, sometime in the 19th century, a French artist was commissioned to create artistic renderings of the year 2000. I don't know if you all know this person. I don't know. I forget his name. But he was supposed to create depictions of life in the year 2000 in Paris. In Paris, right? And he created this fascinating series of paintings of what education might look like, right? And in his world, in Paris, in Paris, education was this machine in a classroom in which some dude, some guy, I suppose that's the teacher, was speaking into some pipe, and this pipe separated itself into multiple pipes and was going directly into the brains of students. That is how this guy understood education to work in the year 2000 from the 19th century, right? That in the year 2000, wow, could be connected to each other's brains. There will be flying cars. He depicted flying cars. He depicted cars with bat-like wings, right? And he drew stuff about fashion. You know, the point here is none of those things came to pass. We have Tesla and we have Twitter. We don't have flying cars and brain states exposed to the provocations of a teacher, right? And my point is that progress is misbehaving. Even with our sophisticated tools, we're much more exhausted. We're working harder than ever before, right? Progress isn't doing the things we expected it to do, right? And that's how I think time is misbehaving. Time is autistic. Time is spilling away from its containment. So I've spoken too much. Does that feel about right? Yeah. Yeah. Chrononormativity blinds us to the autism of time. Chrononormativity obscures the autistic tendencies of time in the ways that it strays away from capture. That's how I want to end that. Yeah.
There, go for it.
Thank you, Báyò. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I thought I was unmuted. First, I wanted to say how also Karen Barad, her work often works with time, and she has a conference on YouTube about Hiroshima that is amazing and blew my mind. So you might want to check that out too.
That reference about 1945 came from Karen Barad's work.
Yeah.
Yes, and Karen is a friend of mine. Dear friend of mine. Yeah.
Okay, then you connect us to her because we've tried to invite her.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Please,
What do I
please.
get? What do I get in return? And that's what Nigerians do.
A coconut birthday cake on the 18th of September.
Yeah, I
In
mean,
Colombia. In Colombia.
There you go.
Okay, Seth, we're with you.
So I guess I've thought about asking you this question for a long time. I think I was thinking like a dangerous question for me to ask.
Good.
Because
all right.
yeah, well, I met or I got in contact with your work when I was reading Akwake Emesi. I don't know if you know them. They're a Nigerian writer.
Yes. I think so.
And yeah, well, they speak about not being human, that they are spirit embodied, what they call it's this, I can't remember right now, but since I saw that, I've had this sense, and I think that you have maybe thought about this, right? When you're saying about not being, about the sadness of dying as a human, sort of that we might not, that human is a category that has been placed on us, but that we are already more than human.
Yeah.
We already go beyond human. And I guess there's different beings already living in human bodies that I'm like very interested in. And I have sometimes felt myself that I feel like I am embodied. I have this body, yes, but there is a sense of myself that it's deeper, that goes in crazier places. And I think Akwake speaks a lot about like the pathologization of like saying this, and that's why I said it's a dangerous question. But I guess like I wanted to ask you how, like if you've encountered this idea, or like if you've like how you think about more than human beings living in human bodies.
Sister, I work with this idea all the time. It frames my thinking. the idea that, and it also renders me vulnerable to a lot of critique, and harsh critique, especially from people who look like me, because I'm a post-humanist scholar, as I like to think of myself and my tendencies and my leanings. And I've often spoken in places where the people look at me somewhere and they're like, especially people who look like me, Black, brown people, and they are like, nah, we've been trying to be human for a long time, and now here you are moving the goalpost, right? we didn't even achieve being human. We were a fraction of human, and now you're saying the human doesn't matter anymore. But that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I am suggesting, along with my dear sister, Marisol de la Cadena. Oh, okay, good. Okay, I'll tell you what we said to each other in private once, because we've had very dangerous conversations. And she said, Báyò, I think that Africans were imported into the human, right? That is, the human is a moral structure, and it's a planet-forming technology. So the human is not this. The human is a practice. And this practice is not just what we do. The practice is what technology is conscripted into doing, what geology is doing, what sugar is doing, what wood is doing, what ecologies are doing. The human is like the applause of specificity. It's not a title or a name or property of any given species. The human is a performance, is a multi-species performance, right? And it is also a colonial territory. The human is a colonial territory. It's a way of stabilizing bodies within the planet in order to do something, right? I think that, along with Marisol, that bodies were imported to sustain and create the human. And they were imported to lift the weight of the human on their backs, right? And this is slavery, right? That the human needed to be subsidized by captivity. And so bodies were imported with the technology of trade winds and slave ships into sustaining and keeping the human aloft. That is why I'm not given to seeking completion within the human. That is why I speak about fugitivity, because I understand the trap of being seen, because I understand being seen within the human, in the ways that we think about Black excellence or justice or equality. I understand that those concepts are vital, but if I were to achieve them in a final way, in a perfect way, the system itself will create my own trouble. It will push me out. I'm constantly in trouble within the human. So what I tell people who look like me is that even if we arrived, we will find out that it cannot sustain us. You know what a name for that concept is? The Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is the idea that if you win this race, you will die. Right? If you win this race, if you keep on this track you're going, you will die. But that's what modernity wants us to do, to win the race, to arrive at the end and lift the trophy of being fully, completely seen and being human. Right. So there are many ways that people use the term human, and it can be semantics, but I think about a human along with other scholars whose name I will not mention, and it's not controversial, I'm just playing with it, that see the human as a racializing colonial performance of presence. And yeah, posthumanism is not a dismissal of the human, it's a troubling of its continuity. Yeah.
Tatiana, Ana, Pedro, we have you in that order.
I was gonna say that if the other people wanna come before me, that's totally fine. I can wait till the end.
Okay. Then Ana, Pedro, Tatiana.
Thanks, Isa. First of all, Báyò, thank you so much. You made
Thank
me
you.
cry particularly with the story of Eshu. Beautiful, beautiful. You invited us to rethink the ways we inhabit our bodies and the world, or at least is the way I see, or I am listening your words. And for a time, I've been reflecting or like thinking on the boundless nature of my being, or of the existence. And I really loved how you invite us to think about our bodies that are not fixed and are fixed entities, or they are, we have to stop thinking as settled bodies, and how to think them in a porous, relational, and also in a movement way. And I have more a practical question, and I want to ask you about how do you cultivate in your daily life, in your practices, in your intimate relationships, how do you honor this fluidity, and how do you keep your body to settle? And the other question that I have, because I think that is related with uncertainty, is how do you surrender to the uncertainty? And how do you surrender it without trying to contain it or control it? Because this is troubling me a lot, particularly being a mom.
Yeah, these are difficult, considerably complex questions to respond to. But if I were to ask you, sister, how do we, like if you had a ringside seat to the life of a caterpillar, you were suddenly whisked away by a god or an alien, and you were positioned before a caterpillar, and you could communicate with this caterpillar, right? And your work would be to convince the caterpillar of its future, because the caterpillar is going through a lot of trouble. It's worried about its weight. It's gaining a lot of weight, and it's worried about its size. And you were invited, I'm just making this up as I go along, so bear with me. You were invited to be the therapist to this caterpillar. What would you tell the caterpillar that would make it feel better? What would you tell the caterpillar? No, you don't have to answer, but I see you're processing something. I see you're processing something. So I'm not going to put you in the spotlight that way, sister. I won't answer for you either. It's kind of rhetorical and maybe not as well. Because anything we tell this caterpillar, if we tell it to stop eating, it will get in the way of what it needs to do in order to become a butterfly, right? It might be that the caterpillar cannot help itself and it's stuck too. But somehow that stuckness leads to a dissolution and it emerges something entirely different and yet strikingly familiar. I would modify your opening statement a little bit. I'm not inviting people to attend to how they inhabit their bodies. So I'm not so much doing that as I am inviting people to notice how habitation is changing. So it's not starting from us, you know. I'm saying how habitation, how accommodation happens is already shifting, right? It's one thing to say, I've lost integrity. It's another thing to notice that integrity itself might be migrating. And so we have to dance with this migration. So to your question about what do we do to surrender, is it possible then to consider the beauty of noticing that surrender may not be entirely possible, and that's fine? That if we told the caterpillar to surrender, you know, to slow down, it may not be able to hear us. It may not be able to receive that therapy, but maybe that's not as tragic as we make it out to be. Maybe our lives will always be this beautiful, chaotic, ironic paradox, this concretion of contradictions. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we will not finally arrive. Maybe there is no heaven to step into. And in saying that, you know, I notice my body shift a little bit because I also long for stability. I long for a final answer. The reason why I do philosophy might actually be at a subconscious level to finally answer the question of my father's death, right? Or death in general, or suffering. I am definitely participating at some level. I don't know how to word or language yet. But I don't know anybody who knows how to do that, sister, because I think our lives are at the edges of an explosion that is still happening. I think the cosmos itself, the universe itself, is a teenager, and it's still figuring itself out, right? The universe isn't stable. It's still figuring out what it means. It's still very awkward and gangly and buck-toothed. The universe is still figuring itself out. So let me end my poetic response by thinking along with Chinua Achebe, who responded to Archimedes. Archimedes famously said, "Give me a place to stand and I will move the world," right? It's almost like, give me a stability, give me a place of absolute perfect answers or resolutions, and I shall move the world. And Chinua Achebe responds and says, but there is no place to stand. There's no place to stand. We all are of the planet and we must move at its pace. We are of the earth and we must move at its pace. So that's how I want to respond at this moment. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Now I think I'm not wrong. We have 5 more minutes. So Pedro.
We do have 5 more minutes.
Yes.
Hello, Báyò. Thank you so much. This is
Hello.
Very inspiring way to begin the day here in Colombia, where the day is beginning. Yes. I have a question that might be a little strange, but I think there's a lot there. So if we place ourselves as humans in the Paleolithic, why was it that this species wanted to move in such a way to come all the way up to modernity, where we are destroying half of, you know, the richness of this beautiful planet that we were placed into? Yeah, why do you think this was?
You know, it's almost, sir. It's almost like asking the question, why did we want to walk? Why did we want to become bipedal, to walk on our 2 feet? There's something about the way that I would ask that question, or I've just asked that question, that obscures the performance and the participation of the world at large in creating that phenomenon of bipedalism. So as I've learned recently, no, not recently, some time ago, it was what a couple of millions of years ago that bipedalism became possible, right? And the story, the hypothesis is that we were on trees and then conditions changed. The conditionality, geophysicality, geostructures, rocks and whatever, sand and soil and sun and planet and atmosphere, all of these conspired and conditions shifted, which made it possible for us to start to think, well, we have to get off this tree. We have to come down this tree. And then we came down. So it's not reducible to what we want. It might be part of what Deleuze and Guattari call desire, right? As a field of conditions. Why did we become modern? It's not answerable by reducing it to human intentions or human trajectories. I think the story of modernity, which is always speculative, is an account of post-humanist shifts and accommodations and accidents of different kinds and sorts. There's a story from 42,000 years ago that scientists and researchers at a university in New Zealand have been popularizing. They say that 42,000 years ago, the atmosphere went crazy and we experienced a polar shift. And this was a Paleolithic time. And the sun rays that came in made the surface untenable. We could not live on the surface of the planet. And so we went down into the earth. We descended. And Big Brother, this was, in many theoretical accounts, the beginning of cave art. We descended into the earth 42,000 years ago, and it coincided, it seems to coincide with the time when art appeared everywhere is it called El Castillo in Spain, the cave, everywhere. Art erupted around this 42,000 year period. Was it us that created art? I don't think so. I think caves had something to do with it. I think the trauma of leaving the surface had something to do with it. Modernity is like like reaching a bus terminal and not realizing how we got there, because we didn't get there by our own means. We didn't get here by our own means. And the meaning of here is still being made, right? I would say that we are here, whatever here means, because of the participation of a world that is never still. And that's how I'll respond to that. Yeah. Thank you.
Tati, I'm going to ask you to be ultra brief because we are at time.
It's okay. That's why I said that I could leave myself for the end, because I just wanted to thank you so much for all that you had, everything. I have multiple questions that I don't think that I can right now materialize, but
Right.
I'm neurodivergent, and but I found out that I was neurodivergent when I was 45. So I spent all my life finding that I was disrupting the spaces where I was, or not feeling like I was following the norms of how I needed to learn. So this has been has given me so much material to understand just many things, and I have multiple ideas going on simultaneously. And that's why it's hard for me to put them in one. And then the other part of it is going back to your love of movies, thriller movies. And I just thought, if you were familiarized with Jordan Peele movies.
Of course.
Okay, so I just thought about that, and then there was another show that came out in Amazon called Them. that it's did you see it?
Did it say dam?
Them, yeah, it's of a African American family that moves into a neighborhood, and it's when like all the redlining happened, and it's a
Oh, yes,
thriller
yes, yes.
movie.
I've seen this. I've
Yeah,
seen this. I've
okay,
seen
okay.
it.
So
Yes,
I
I've
was
seen it.
just like, I was just thinking when you said, and I was just was thinking about those movies and how powerful they are
Beautiful.
in their story. Yeah, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tatiana.
Thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, Báyò. Thank you, every one of you, and those of you who were here earlier, and those of you who will be here later through the cracks of this digital time that we now live in. This has been incredible. Báyò, you are such a delightful journey. That's what you are. Thank you. I
Thank
hope
you.
our paths cross again soon. I know
They're
they
always,
will.
they're
And
always awesome.
and I'm gonna ask everyone maybe to show our gratitude. You can open your mics. It's very nourishing to hear each other, to see each other, even though we are in 2D. But in this last second, if you can show yourself, if that's fine with you, and say thank you, that will be very beautiful. Thank you, Báyò.
Thank you,
Gracias.
Thank you,
Báyò.
Gracias,
thank you.
Báyò.
So
Muchas
beautiful.
gracias.
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 Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Chao. Thank you.
Gracias, Báyò.
Pues está bien.
Chao. Gracias a todas. Gracias. Chao. Recording.